Over the last few days, I've been comparing two cameras against each other. The Panasonic GH5S with the 25mm f1.7 prime up against the 3 times or 4 times more expensive Sony FX3 with a 50mm f1.8 prime. Can you see a huge difference in the overall image quality? If you're thinking of starting a YouTube channel, Micro Four Thirds is so underrated. All the YouTubers basically dismiss it based on low light performance. If you're in a studio with lighting, it doesn't matter. And the GH5S also handles low light extremely well. We'll test that out in just a moment. But the FX3 is great because you get that full frame look and you also get great low light performance and good autofocus. The autofocus isn't flawless, and if you're still shooting products, you still need manual focus. It's one of those things. The great thing about the GH5S, if you're thinking about getting into this camera, and being that they're about half price right now in Australia, it makes a whole lot of sense. And the reason why is if you set up manual focus like I've got it right now, I can turn the camera off, turn it back on, and the manual focus resume feature means I'm going to be in focus if I sit down at the desk. It stops me from doing stuff like this, whereas the Sony, if I hold it over my face, will autofocus obviously on this little vinyl bag from my microphone. But if you don't need autofocus in that type of scenario, this is one of the best YouTube studio tools you can get, hands down. And being that it's only about $1,400 or $1,500 at the time of filming is absolutely insane. So for under $1,700 with this lens, you're getting a very comparable camera in terms of studio image quality up against the Sony FX3 with a much more expensive rig. I think I paid $6,200 for the camera. Why? No, actually I use it for a lot of stuff outside of YouTube as well. But the Sony FX3 is a great camera, and if you want the best from Sony, arguably that's the camera to go for. But the GH5S was a flagship Micro Four Thirds camera. You're getting a different sensor to even the GH6. You get that dual gain native ISO. You get great low light performance and overall a more premium image with 9% wider field of view. So in a way, maybe this test isn't quite comparable to standard Micro Four Thirds because we do get a 9% extra field of view and a little bit more background blur with the GH5S than you would find even with the GH6. But this is the best I could do. In the studio, I've been using the Sony FX3 now for quite some time. I'm now getting a multi-camera setup again with GH5S cameras, and this is the reason why. Have a look at how great it is. Let's lower the lights. I've just turned off my fill light right now. Let us know if you can see a massive difference with both of these cameras. Odds are they're both looking great. I got studio monitors right behind each camera and they both look the same to my eye, but there might be some differences here and there. Let us know in the comments section. Let's lower the light some more. And now you're looking at both cameras at ISO 1000. I turned the overhead light off. I still have the floor LED on, that little blue light behind me. And also this fill light is back on. With the overhead on, I was just blowing out my skin completely. So this is how that looks, and the light is now at its lowest in terms of its output. So can you see a massive difference? How's the GH5S holding up against the Sony FX3? Let's dim the lights. And now we're at ISO 3200 on both cameras, f3.2, which made for correct exposure in the room here with my primary light still on at 8% brightness. So I've dropped it 50% the light from before, and now this is how it looks correcting with the aperture. So this is both cameras. Micro Four Thirds up against full frame. Is there a massive difference? Let's crank it up some more. Now with both cameras set to ISO 6400, f1.7 on the GH5S and f1.8 on the FX3. And lastly, over to 12,800, a setting I wouldn't shoot on either of these two cameras. As great as the FX3 is, this will still look like trash. It will look like nicer trash than the GH5S, but I wouldn't shoot with this particular scenario ever, especially in a studio. So someone saying the FX3 is great in low light, it means up to a point. It's not just amazing at every ISO setting on the camera. So just keep that in mind. If you're gonna be shooting under regular lighting conditions, odds are this has proved the GH5S is still very capable, even in 2023. I'm gonna go back to the computer, edit all of this, talk about the results, and I'll be right back. All right, let's wrap this video up. I'm gonna talk about the results. So starting at ISO 320 with normal studio lighting that I'm using right now, they both looked awesome. The GH5S would make for a far more cost-effective B cam for something like the Sony a7S III or the FX3 or whatever other Sony camera you've got, based on its overall image quality. And once you tweak that natural picture profile, you can get very similar results. So I would call that a tie. At ISO 1000, both cameras are usable, but I did notice more noise on my curtain behind me at that particular setting on the GH5S, which is a notoriously noisy setting on this particular camera. So avoid that at all costs, but I'm going to definitely give the win there to the Sony FX3. At ISO 3200, the GH5S had very comparable noise levels to that of the Sony FX3, except the FX3 looked a little bit sharper. Although I'm still going to give the win to the colors to the GH5S. Let's talk about ISO 6400. Both cameras gave me a really noisy background. Interestingly enough, for whatever reason, the Sony was giving me almost like a hot or dead pixel right above my head, which I fixed after the fact. I was like, oh no, what's wrong with my camera? So anyway, I ran pixel mapping and it got rid of that pixel. So if you noticed it or if it showed up on YouTube, yeah, that's what was going on. But overall, the noise floor was very comparable between them both. But again, in those kind of lower lit sort of situations, the Sony FX3 will look a tad sharper. At 12,800 with an f1.8 lens, the Sony FX3 was horrendous. The GH5S also looked horrendous at 12,800 like I thought it would. It was also noisier than the FX3, but I wouldn't shoot with either of these cameras at 12,800. Picking the right camera comes down to what works best in your situation, but under moody lighting, Micro Four Thirds will allow you to have the ISO lower to do a product showcase over full frame, unless of course you want only the corner of something in focus. If you only want the corner of your product in focus, then full frame is the way to go. Or if you're doing a top-down shot, you can make that work with full frame. But let's say, for example, I'm shooting this camera with Micro Four Thirds. I've got most of it in focus by f2, which is giving me that f4 depth of field look on full frame. To get the same on the full frame camera, I'm gonna need to double the ISO and stop down, which drives up the noise floor. A lot of people don't talk about this. This is why I've gone back to Micro Four Thirds a lot in this studio, because shooting with full frame cameras, I'm forever stopping down to f3.4, which is the exact look I had on Micro Four Thirds. Thanks for watching.